When we were invited to take part of this conference and also to show the work in the exhibition program, we were always afraid of not doing the right thing. How do we start? I mean, sometimes there are a few incidents in your life that make you change your directions and rethink about your position. I will start maybe with 2 or 3 incidents that happened. Regarding myself at the moment, I was sent to France in the early 1970s, not understanding or speaking French language at all. I was left in a boarding school. And during one of the French lessons, which is in the French system, you learn poems, and part of that learning process, you have to keep a book. On one page, you copy the poems, and on the opposite page, you illustrate the poem that you are learning. And of course, not understanding the language, I took full liberty of that blank paper. Well, that was the first incident. Not fitting the subject, or hors sujet. The second incident that happened a little bit later during my study at the Art College, again in south of France. One day, one of the tutors turned up and said to me, looking at the work that I was doing, and said something like, you are Laotian. His name was Jean Biagini, Italian sort of origin. So as a Laotian student, you should be making Laotian work or Laotian art. And this tutor, obviously came from Italy, married a Japanese wife. He himself is making Japanese ceramics, and there he was telling me that I should be doing Laotian work. And then a little bit later, again in 1993, during the Turner Prize competition, Brian Sewell wrote something about the Turner Prize, and this is what he said. I thought the Turner Prize, according to the rules, was for British artists.
That was a specific reference to Vong's inclusion in the year of 1993. Mm-hmm. So we thought we'd just, as Sonia mentioned, Brian Sewell in her piece, we thought it would be quite nice to kind of complete the circle.
So we've got to try and make sense within this context, this conference, through our practice. First, I think I'm going to ask Claire to read an extract that she wrote on one of the work that I did in 1991.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've always approached our collaboration, which is something that's evolved over 30 years now, has been that the key principle of the work is that it never illustrates a theoretical position. The work has always come first. So I just want to read something that I wrote in 1991 in the context of Vong's show at the Chisenhale Gallery. It was a piece I wrote in the catalogue, not really a catalogue essay, because I didn't really write essays so much as the idea we had was that anything I wrote was from the work. It was something that we talked about a lot in relation to Roland Barthes, who himself wrote from work, not on it. And that's something that we found very interesting over the years to talk about. So this is just from the essay in that publication. Perhaps the greatest danger when writing about work such as Vong Phaophanit's is to resort to the artist's personal history to explain the work. The use of this sort of biographism as a principle of explanation imposes immediate limitations on the work itself by grounding it as the unproblematic expression of a fixed identity. Phaophanit's work, moreover, is fundamentally at odds with this system of interpretation in that it is not rooted in preconceived meaning, but rather engaged in the process of making new meaning. So I just wanted to kind of read that out because it really sort of situates the dialogue we've had and the collaboration that has evolved since.
So our collaboration started, from the moment we sort of knew each other, going back to mid-80s, so 1985. So it was a quite loose type of collaboration. And at that time, I was still doing my own work in the sense that, And one of the work that has great exposure at that time was neon rice field. What I was trying to do was trying to answer to this famous Jean Biagini. It is about how to question, how to put the questions in a clear manner, and how to use the materials part of the artwork. And how to preserve all the interest that I had at that time going back to paintings. So the central side of it, the spatial side, the materiality, the light, the color, the texture. And neon rice field sort of fit more or less that request at that time. It's a combination of rice and neon tubes, red neon light.
What we found, though, with this work, some of you might know it already, some of you might know a little bit of what's been written around it, was that it was almost immediately recuperated because of its association with the Turner Prize. It was immediately recuperated in the national press, on all the broadsheets, the Evening Standard, the non-broadsheets, but really across all that kind of narrativization, the same message was being sent out, whether it was elegantly put or less so by people like Brian Sewell. The message was, it was East meets West. It was, someone said in the Independent, I believe, that the glow of the red light was reminiscent of the artist's view of the sunset across the Mekong River. At that point, Vong hadn't been to Laos for 13 years. Anyway, we probably ought to move on because we haven't got much time.
I mean, the other point that I like to make is that the rice was coming from the American Rice Council. And the neons, it was sponsored even by them. And the neons, at that time, was supposed to be the Western sort of side. There was no greater places to contemplate neon work than places like Shanghai or Hong Kong at that time. So it's about questioning ourselves, the preconceived ideas of each other. Etopia, we had the chance to be invited to go and spend 1 year in Berlin, part of the DAAD program. And at that year, we moved our entire family. So at that time, we had 2 young children with us. And the new context, new language, new city, but at the same time, there was this odd familiarity. After all, after spending a few numbers of years in Europe and understanding the history, and we felt at the same time quite displaced, but funnily, at the same time, quite familiar to the space. Etopia was an installation or 2 installation works that we did at the end of that residency. And one took place in the DAD gallery, and the other one was at the roof terrace of the DAD office We have chosen the two different sites because one was in the former Eastern Berlin and the other one was the Berlin as we all probably knew at that time.
We've included this quotation because alongside this piece we created a bookwork which included a lot of photographic work that Vong had made during the year and a lot of written-based work that I had done during the year, and we brought those two elements together in this bookwork, and that is actually a quotation from the book. Berlin is our Etopia, a topos without place.
What you see here is the use of polybutadiene, which is a man-made rubber, 100% man-made. And it has this, we see it as quality of semi-translucent. So it looks a little bit like organic, but at the same time, the greatest potential of this material is it doesn't have a particular shape. You put it on the shelf and the next day it will be running down and dropping and sticking, which goes against the grain of a sculpture should be a fixed shape and volume. And this is the other installation.
We called it its twin.
Mm-hmm. It's a bird device to stop them landing.
And just a few words about the materiality. So you had this, as you can see in the previous slide, the anti-pigeon devices looked from a distance like a kind of very soft, sort of white, kind of almost sort of shag pile carpet. But of course you got up close and they were really quite sort of vicious, pieces of very sharp plastic with vicious intent. And the polybutadiene, as Vong said, was this kind of mutable, amorphous kind of rubber. In fact, the night of the opening, it fell far, far quicker than we had anticipated because Vong thought it would fall over a number of weeks. In fact, it was a very hot September evening, and it all fell in about 2 hours, and people were reduced to kind of wading through kind of gelatinous rubber with cans of beer in their hands at the private view. So it's an interesting moment. And the way I always see this work, actually, Etopia, the 3 Etopia pieces, are as a kind of work that got away. And by that, I mean that it kind of escaped, even though it came quite soon after the Neon Rice Field that didn't really escape. This piece has never been shown anywhere other than Berlin and Canada. It's never been shown in this country. It's received very, very little attention. And in a way, I think it's kind of circumnavigated a lot of narratives that would have otherwise been imposed upon it. So it's a work that was quite close to our hearts in that sense. And also, in relation to our collaboration, I would say that it was a critical moment, the year in Berlin, because the Berlin book, the Etopia book, was a moment when the written word, which was mainly my contribution, and the visual, which was then mainly Vong's, came together, and the written word started functioning almost like acoustic imagery. So you had a sense in which there was a parity between the word and the image. It's a bit difficult to explain unless you've got the book in front of you, but that's what we want to say about that.
And then there was a series of temporary and private commissions and also public engaged project that for some reason contained the word dream in the title. And this is one of them, the Dream House. After visiting several times Toronto, one day we've been invited to put in a proposal, and that idea was accepted. But that idea was based on our previous visit of Toronto. We realized that it was an upcoming city, full of quite a young city, but very cosmopolitan. People were coming to Toronto from all over the world. And our client for this project is their business, building home for these people and offices and places to rest and to. So we sort of, slide in this idea about, a little house amongst the two tall towers they were, building. And they, funnily enough, accepted to play along. The house is just a simple structure made of fiberglass, and we deliberately made sure that the legs of the house is a tripod rather than 4 legs. It makes it more fragile in that sense, and awkwardly placed as well to support the structure.
And when we were thinking about the image of the house, we were looking at the kind of the form of the house as a kind of iconic form, cross-cultural, and it was astounding just Googling it, how this shape is actually incredibly cross-cultural, and people identify and associate it with shelter, home, and that kind of thing. So we wanted to kind of take that, and of course also perhaps poke fun a little bit at the client because of introducing this kind of Monopoly house, cheeky little icon that stood. Although it's quite a tall piece, it actually looks incredibly diminutive and small and powerless amongst this kind of forest of high-rises.
It's a totem of a house that these people have left behind and now finding or creating a new home. So this is a temporary project where we ask people to participate some way or another. It's a temporary project in Herne Bay. It's called Bay Windows. Herne Bay used to be a destination, a wish destination 200 years ago, 250 years ago for people living in London. And we wanted to find out 200 years later if these people staying there, do they still have another dream destination? By producing a small postcard and explaining clearly about the project, we have asked them to contribute by writing down their dream destination. It's a very sort of open definition. It didn't have to be a place or city, but it could be anything. It could be my garden or on top of the world, etc. And then this word has been made in neon tubes and then placed in different places in Herne Bay.
And each word kept the exact graphic form in the neon sculpture of the person who had written it. So they're all in completely different handwritten form.
Similar ideas was then tried in Birmingham. I think it was the oldest train station in the country. I like the meeting of that, the history of the building and the how do you say, the collection of destination here.
We weren't sure what we were going to get because it's a completely different context to Herne Bay. So when the postcard went out, we got the most responses from a lot of homeless people, actually, which wasn't an intention. It was something that just happened. So, and a huge amount of different languages. So probably, I don't think we repeated one language twice, actually. So that was really interesting sculpturally because you got all the different formations of letters and so on.
Now, we thought it was important to show you a few images of the missing element of the work shown here, It Is As If. And that element is an installation of timber poles of various size and various lengths. It was first shown at the Block Gallery in Brixton. This is before you enter the space, and you have to go through almost this labyrinth of timber poles. And then finally you arrive in an open area where you can view the 3 themes being projected on the wall.
This was very much kind of process driven work because we had access to the gallery for about 4 months. So we could pretty much camp out in there and build. And it took about a month to put the timber up with assistants and working most days. So it was quite a kind of, quite an interesting process. We didn't have a kind of master plan. We built in a kind of ad hoc way as we went. And the only kind of rule was that it had to be safe and not kind of kill someone as they walked through it. But otherwise we were just adding and creating the space as we went, really.
And then, of course, you had the 3 films. I think we should give just a little bit of information about the 3 films. I mean, one is an outcome of a collaboration that we had with Professor Kneebone. Do you want to talk about Professor Kneebone a bit? I mean,
well, he's a former surgeon. Can you hear? Sorry. He's a former surgeon who's now Professor of Engagement at the Wellcome Trust and also Professor of Surgical Engagement at Queen Mary, I think. Imperial, sorry. And we had for a long time wanted to make a piece of work showing a surgeon deterritorialized from his or her environment. So in other words, take away the body, take away the team, take away the tools, and just be left with the kind of mapping of the hands, the sort of choreography, if you like, of the hands. We thought we might try it in post-production, but in the end we didn't. We asked him to do it himself through memory and imagination. And there's just a small excerpt of a film that we wanted to end with. I don't know if can we just end with a 2-minute excerpt?
5 minutes.
Just if we get to see it, this is a clip from a film that we created in Laos in 2006 as part of an international project called The Quiet in the Land, curated by France Morin. And it's in the same kind of spirit as the Etopia book, in that it's the words and images coming together.
เบิ่งในภาษาเยอรมัน1,000 ปีผ่านมาแล้วลูโอเกินหมายถึงหมายไว้เลี้ยวมองซึ่งเขาของคำเว้านี้หมายถึงซองเบิ่งผ่านหู ทั้งหมดที่มีตัวตนจะสลายระเหยสู่อากาศความเห็นของเก่ามาร์กซ์ ข้าพเจ้าตัดสายพันธุ์ตะจองดึงเฮ็ดให้ตนเองล่องลอยแบบอิสระแบบเหมือนสุนัขพวกนั้นที่ย่างวนเวียนไปมาอยู่คันใดแคมตะลิ่งแม่น้ำคอง เห็นในภาษาลาตินเซกุยหมายถึงติดตามด้วยสายตาอยู่ลาวเพื่อเห็นนั่นข้าพเจ้าจะต้องละทิ้งทั้งหมดที่เคยได้เรียนรู้มา